The RtBatchTable web part is used for showing lists of what we call batches from our batch records that are stored on the Pi server. Now, batches are simply events that are repeated. We traditionally call them batches. Let me show you an example of what types of processes lend themselves towards batches. Now, this is a traditional batch environment in which we have, well, in this case, it's a cheesecake factory. This cheesecake factory is going to be making cheesecakes. By first of all, well, it mixes up some crust. It sends that crust to a super cake maker. It mixes up some cake mix, the actual cheesecake stuffing, sends that to the super cake maker, and then about once an hour, this super cake maker pumps out about 600 of these cheesecakes, and that's considered one, in this case, one unit batch. Now, that's something that probably happens several times a day, and we, at some point, we would like to be able to see specific instances where you ran those batches, or ran a unit batch to produce a certain number of cheesecakes. So in order to do that, we have, as you can see, it's a tabular web part right here where you can specify the level of a repeated event you want to look for. I'm going to look for a unit batch here. You can specify the start time and the end time. I'll go back the last 4 hours, for example, and you can specify some other things about that repeated event. Now, if you're interested in looking at an event that you've done, over and over again, you usually know something about it. You know what the product was, or what the name of the procedure was, what physical unit you used to produce it, or maybe a batch ID. In that case, that's what I'm going to look for. I'm going to look for all these super cake maker unit batches. So I'm looking for a batch ID that has that string. I'll go ahead and search, and when I search, this is going to go out and find on the Pi server those repeated events, also known as batches or unit batches. And here are the repeated events that we found that meet that criteria. So that's what this is, the RtBatchView tabular web part here. If I scroll down a little, you can see there's some nice capability here to not only retrieve information, like for example, this tells me that I had a unit batch with that particular batch ID. The product was large. It was produced in this SCM unit, and it started at 7:09. It ended at 7:55. So that tells me a lot about that batch, but it also allows me to provide context to other web parts. So for example, if you look at our trend down here, that trend is currently looking at just a specific period in time. When I click on one of these batches, we've got this configured such that it's got a connection to the trend. And when I click on a batch, it sends that information over to this trend. So now what we're doing is we're looking at the data from that specific unit batch. We're looking at that particular repeated event. So whether you're making cheesecakes or pharmaceuticals, or whether you're a power generator that treats each day as a batch, so that you can go back and compare one Saturday to all the other Saturdays, for example. At some point you'd like to look up these batches and compare them to other batches. Now, if you want to learn more about this, we do have a webinar that you may be interested in. If you go to the Show Me How recorded webinar series, that's off of training.osisoft.com, and you look at it's the webinar that is listed as, here it is, it's called the RT Web Parts version 2.1 training. You'll see a lot more information about batches and description of the RtBatchTable. This and all the other webinar series you can find available from our webinar page. And to go to our webinar page, you simply go to our main website, and within our main website, choose the option called Events and Webinars. And from within here, you'll find this is called the Show Me How webinar series. And that's where you'll find all these training webinars. I'm going to add an RtBatchView web part to this web part page. This web part page has just a couple of RT web parts on it. Here's the RtValues web part, here's the RT Trend, etc. Let me go ahead and add RtBatchView. I'll go into Site Actions, and I'm going to choose Edit Page. As you see, when you choose Edit Page, it shows the zones, and each zone has a and a button on it that you can use to add new web parts. I'll go ahead and add this web part. That brings up a list of the web parts. I'm going to bring up the web part called the RtBatchView web part. So let me go ahead and scroll down. We're going to look through all the existing RT web parts. Here it is. I'll go ahead and choose RtBatchView, and I'll click on Add. And that adds an RtBatchView web part. Now if I exit out of this edit mode, I can use this like an end user, just as it is, to search for different types of repeatable events. Now again, it's not the scope of this class to go into all the different types of repeated events. We're going to concentrate on unit batches in this example. So if I take a look here, if I just say let's go through all the unit batches, and let's say the last 2 hours, everything that started within the last 2 hours, I'll go ahead and search. We'll see some search results appear. Not a very discriminating search because it's going to bring up a lot of stuff that I'm not really interested in. We're not looking at our Cheesecake Factory exclusively yet. There we go. So here's our set of results, and each one of these is a batch record. So we haven't looked at these batches in great detail, and again we won't in this class. But as you can see, each batch record has an ID and a few attributes like the product that we were making, the unit in which it was manufactured, start time and end time, etc. And that's how you do a very simple batch retrieval. And as you can see, the way I've got this configured here, if I do want to restrict this, and let's just look for all those things from the Super Cake Maker, let's go back, say, the last 4 hours. When I search for that, now this is going to restrict it to just those batches whose batch ID have the string SCM. So this is our Cheesecake Factory example here.